Hi, welcome to this new episode of the IR Strikes Back.
Today we're talking about the movie G20. The movie is pretty new. It just came out in 2025 on Amazon Prime.
We will not hide the fact that this movie is not well known, but it was a must that we needed to analyze that movie because it's basically all what we're studying and all our main area of interest. So buckle up and we're gonna start this. First thing, G20 is very interesting for us because it puts like the foreign policy at the center of importance in terms of internal politics in the U.S., which is a filthy lie. Sorry, guys, not sorry. So the story starts with a female black president of the U.S. that has struggles with her kids. She's the president of the U.S., but she's also a mother, so she has to juggle with these two roles, and also with the fact that her position is being questioned.
Yeah, because as a woman, she's have to work harder. Like she said in the movie, I have to work as twice as the other to get there. The politics have mainly men who work there. And as a woman, she has to prove herself to be allowed to work as a president. Also, if I continue with my feminist critique, at the G20 event, she doesn't want to wear a dress or high heel, but she has to do because when a woman is a public figure, like people look at her style and judge her based on that. But if you are a man, just wear a suit and that's okay. But a woman needs to wear a dress and high heel because if not, she will be criticized and they will start questioning her ability to do this work. But it's just clothes.
Yeah, they will question her capacities, but also how they represent the U.S. citizen. As a woman, especially in politics and in foreign politics, you have to find a way to be presentable, to respect yourself, and to generate an interest. Because, as Lauren said, it's mainly a place of men. So, as women, it's been said in networking event to me that you have to shine on your own and to make people want to go talk to you as a diplomat. So I know that a very well-known story is that I think it's an ambassador that was always wearing a different brooch because it sparked a discussion. And foreign politics for diplomats are all about discussion. Like, it's difficult to quantify the results of a diplomatic visit because it's mainly based on human interaction, and it's only many months or years later that you understand that the fact that you went to that meeting, that you organized that meeting, was essential to lead to more concrete agreement or actions with other countries or another country.
Also in the movie, the president is wearing a red dress with a cape. Don't you think about Superman?
A style for a woman in politics, in foreign politics, is very important because it defines yourself, it gives the image, and you see that even the first ladies, when you see them in high-level meeting, because in foreign politics, there's different foreign policy level. And often what you see, what Lawrence and I might do at some point, is the always diplomacy. So most of the diplomatic discussion happens in between always, in non-official ways, because there's people like us that in international meetings will go from one room to another and exchange information about what country X wants from country Z. And with that hidden exchange, we might also come to a bigger agreement. But when it's the state leader that goes to a meeting, it's even more important because there's no intermediary. Like, it's them that are taking the decision. So the high-level meeting are really important because it might help them to take quicker decision because the foreign affairs minister have to send a message to their capital, to their party leader to ask, is it fine? Are we okay with this? They have to have some kind of permission to really put in place things in this kind of meetings if it's not the state leader that is going or the prime minister. So these kind of events are very based on personality. The way that they present themselves is very important. And in this case,
the president need to wear a dress to make the other man interest in what she's saying. It's a way to prove that she's allowed to be there because of their assumption.
And that she cares about being there also.
And we can go back to the G20.
The fact that the G20 is happening in a luxury resort, some of you might question why. This is not realistic. They just wanted to blow off their budget. But actually, no. Most of these kind of high-level meeting happens in that kind of resort. If you look to the recent G7 in Canada, in Alberta, it was a similar set. Like, most of these meetings are happening in luxury resort. And if you go back to the Bretton Woods Agreement, Bretton Woods is actually the same kind of hotel at the time. It's very luxurious because they want to put the leaders at ease, to put them in a very favorable place to discuss and not have to worry about anything and feel at ease, in a good mood enough to make discussion happen. And for those that don't know, the Bretton Woods Agreement is basically the main agreement that created the international economic system that we have today.
And I just realized we didn't explain what is the G20.
Oh, yeah. So the G20 is the meeting of the 20 most important economy at the time that it was created. As you know, it might not represent the state of the biggest economies today, but when it was created, it was accurate. But today, many groups have been questioning the G20. So, the G20 is happening in Cape Town. And one thing that we have to take note of is that when we see the scene with the mercenary that arrived to reinforce the security team of the U.S., they discussed that the Iraq war. And it's very revealing that this movie, in our opinion, is a statement of the U.S. that they want to reinvent their soft power because they recognize that this war that they led have been a bad war and have cost a lot of lives.
Yeah, we can see that with the Australian guys who say to, I think, the president that's thanks to the USA war, which killed two of his brother's arm by a bomb who wasn't destined to them, that is being there and trying to change the world and kidnap the president. So it's a way to recognize that the Iraq war wasn't good.
And was a bad decision from the US. It might seem like very tiny detail, but it's the first time we believe that the US is so openly recognizing that this was a bad war, that one of the decisions wasn't a good one.
Talking about war, the president of the United States was in a war. She was being in the army. She was a soldier.
She's a veteran.
And that is realistic because, in fact, the majority of the US president were in the army.
Like, it's more difficult to find presidents that weren't. And this is the reason why the US presidents often salute with their hands, because they were part of the military. Whereas in Canada, most of the prime minister weren't part of the army. This is why when Canadian prime minister passed before Canadian military, they don't salute because most of them weren't soldiers. Whereas the president, the US presidents, salute for that reason.
For precision, the last 4 presidents, like since Barack Obama to Trump, none of them were in the army.
So yeah, but it's recent. But most of the US presidents were part of the army. So that's why they will traditionally salute. And to get back to when the president goes in the fabulous reception room where all the leaders are, she's giving the impression that she's going to war, because clothes can be seen as armor in these kind of events, because it's how you present yourself, as we explained. But this president was part of the army. She's a soldier, so she thinks that all these talks and all these appearances are pointless. When British Prime Minister comes and tries to put on appearances, even if she knows that she's not welcome in that summit, and he shoves a glass of champagne in her hands, and he says, "You cannot bulldoze them. You have to play the game," basically, he says. She said, "I've got to save the world. Now, I'm in the action." But foreign politics is all about discussion, all about talk. And in talk, you achieve things, but you have to be patient. We consider that this movie is the first stance of the US new soft power, new perception of themselves. Another stepping stone is the fact that the project that Madam President wants to pass by the leaders digitalize their money, because that's her big plan that she wants to make all the other leaders agree to. And that's revealing because it suggests that the American dollar failed as a universal currency and that she wants to fix that. And it's interesting because it's another kind of assumed weakness, because nowadays the US have been less popular. It was challenged by other currencies, such as the RMB, so the yuan, the Chinese yuan.
Exactly, because most of the American debt is owned by China, and China owns physical money of the US. So if China is really mad at the American, they just can link the money.
And they've already done it with the first time that I think Trump threatened to impose tariff. They sold a lot of parts of the American treasure, actually. So, and it kind of hurt the US. So it's very revealing that they want to evolve and they recognize that they made mistakes, because one of the reasons why the US dollar is so strong is that most of the transaction in terms of gas are made solely in US dollars due to an agreement that was passed between the Middle Eastern countries, main producer of gas, and the US at the time, is that they will retain their monopoly over gas, but they have to make transaction in US dollars. But China have been telling these countries, oh, it's fine if you don't pay me in US, if we don't use US dollars to do the transaction. Another thing about China, speaking about Asian representation, because they recognize South Korea, but that's the only Asian country that we hear of. We see a representative of India one fraction of second, and then we see 2 seconds of like probably the president of China. We see them, but a total of 3 seconds each in total, actually.
Even though, like, for South Korea, the president is not really important. Like, it's mostly the first lady who's doing the action. Like, at most, the president gonna just be killed.
Yes, but I think it's still more important, but it's very clear in the vision of the Americans that their main ally in Asia is South Korea, even if at one time it was more Japan. But here the emphasis so much South Korea that it eclipses all the other Asian countries, it seems, in the movie.
Also, the first lady of South Korea, she is one of the characters who escaped with the U.S. president.
Yes, and the people that escape, but first of all, at some point, all the journalists go away and all the aides go away, which is very unrealistic because there's always going to be aides that stay with them and they all go away. And at that moment, the terrorist strikes and act because everyone goes away. And it's referencing to the so-called closed-door diplomacy, which states that the real talks happens behind closed doors, which countries have been trying to prevent, but that's a thing in international diplomacy. It brings up the chances of having meaningful discussion behind closed doors.
And with that being said, the U.S. president escaped.
And the fact that the terrorists even managed to attack is very unlikely.
Yeah, even though, like, just the representation of terrorists, like, I know it's not cliche for one time the bad guys is Australian and then something else, but the real bad guy, the stronger of the terrorists who kill everyone is Russian.
Yes, they've been trying hard to not represent the bad guys as one country for once, which is, I will have to say, it's better. Another thing that is very revealing about the new soft power that the U.S. wants to spread is that the enemies are not one country. It's a non-national force. It's a not state actor. Nowadays, the threat is coming from within and not directly from another country.
So yeah, the threat is coming from inside. And we can see that one of the main allies of the terrorists is someone who's working in the U.S. government.
And at the end, we even realize that the so-called friend of the U.S. president is actually a traitor, which only reinforces the idea that the threat is within and that as leaders of different countries, they need to stay united against that threat, and they need to be not one state but many states that cooperate to deal with that threat.
Because if they don't do that, the world's stability will change.
Yes, and it's becoming to the point that non-state actors have been gaining more power, especially from new technologies.
And we can start talking about your specialty, which is AI.
So, with artificial intelligence and new technologies being so easily available to anyone, like it's becoming a looming threat for the state because there's more variables to take in account that can destabilize the governments. So, for example, AI, the terrorists are forcing the leaders to say random sentences so they can reproduce them in AI version and make them say what they want to hear.
Can you see the link with the reality? Where we saw in the media that they say, oh, you know, this video about this president is not true, it's fake, it's AI. Or you know, this song is made by AI.
You see how AI can quickly make a situation, an internal situation, a society be destabilized, to generate fear, to even at some point it might generate a revolution. It can start movements based on fake videos, fake statements. And this is exactly the kind of weapon that the terrorists were using to create fear. But before, it was bombs, it was big attacks like it happened in Paris and in many other countries in the world. But today, with AI, they can do the same thing with less men, less risk, and with more impacts because there's so many disinformation and instabilities about what is right, what is false, what is wrong. We don't know anymore because this new technologies is not being framed by any kind of international laws or little national laws. But I just want to nuance what I just said. Like, the fact that people are questioning more the source of information is great if it leads to develop a critique stance of what is given to us. But it's also difficult to identify what we want to believe in and what is the kind of truth that we want to hear. It's more easier to fall into echo chambers due to this, due to the algorithm. Nowadays, we're really in a world that it's easy to get stuck into a corner that we get feed the same kind of information. So if you add AI, only exacerbate the current situation, but AI is also a tool that we can use to make new discoveries, to lessen the burden of many workers, and is also an issue in terms of environmental carbon footprint. And actually, there's still hope because currently, even if it's going to take years, there's currently an international treaty that is being discussed, and among countries, all countries are participating in this discussion, and they've progressed recently, especially at the summit at Paris. And research centers such as Mila in Montreal with Joshua Bengio have been really trying hard to put in place guidelines, ethical norms, and think about how to deal with this new technology in a more responsible way.
Yeah, because some studies show that people start to stop believing what they saw online. Even though it's real, they will say, oh no, it's fake. So there's like two effects, the echo chamber and this effect that with AI is happening. And to go back to the agreement that they started negotiate, like Anne said, that's gonna take time. In the movie, it's not realistic that at the end they all being agree with the proposition of the U.S. president, because in reality, people gonna negotiate. They're gonna say, I don't want that the world should is in this sentence. It should be the world could or can.
And it might seem pointless for our daily life, but it's very important because it's the base of what countries will use to develop their own national laws, which will impact your daily life and your use of this new technology. So, that being said, if we go back to G20, the president of the US but escape with the MIF director, with the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and the First Lady of South Korea. The first thing that the British Prime Minister says is, "Where are your secret services?" Okay, can we take a second? That's American way of seeing things. Because it shows that the world relies on the US to defend themselves.
Yeah, because in fact, the British have the MI6 that will be there also at this event, because all the country will have their own security team.
So that's why there's no big issue that happened with these international conferences. It's because you have to understand that it's like 20 secret services, 20 police force, 20 personal bodyguards that are there, like you do times 20. So that's why none of this is very realistic. But anyways, it's very interesting that they choose the UK Prime Minister as a main character for this, because it's like they're trying to compare the UK and the US. Because the UK, we see them as disconnected from reality, relying on a past glory with Churchill from the Second World War, First World War, Cold War, whereas the US, the president of the US is, and now has just finished her military service, was a soldier earlier, saved a child, and is aiming to have practical knowledge. And this situation is perfect to put in place that practical knowledge that the UK visibly doesn't have. And also, it's very interesting the role of South Korea in that movie. Because as we mentioned, they're portrayed as the main Asian ally of the US, which is very revealing because even under Trump, one thing that Trump said before the tariff, of course, they said that what South Korea was doing with their military was great, and that other Asian countries should take example of them. But before, as we said, Japan was a more important ally than South Korea. So it says a lot. Even today, it's a constant. Even if tariffs are going probably to be applied to South Korea, still the US up to this day with this new president still believe that South Korea is an important ally in the region.
At some point, I think, if I'm not wrong, the first lady's like saved the US president life.
Yes, okay, this movie is also very feminist because there's a discussion about how they dress, and the MIF director states that she cannot walk with these heels, and they forced her to wear heels to make her appear taller. She says to the US president, "I'm not strong like you." And then after the discussion, she takes off the heels and just throw them away, which is very feminist, in my opinion. So in that movie, South Korea, the president of South Korea explains what is artificial intelligence while he's still in the room with global leaders which are being forced to say random things to program the AI to reproduce them artificially. And it's not for nothing that he explained what is artificial intelligence, because right now South Korea is aiming very strong to invest in artificial intelligence, which is why they've been really interested in our knowledge here in Montreal regarding artificial intelligence, and that they want to partner because they want to develop that. And as Lawrence was saying, the First Lady of South Korea is a badass. She just stabs the villain before to save life of the US president.
Also, just before we finish this episode, I want to talk about the security agent of the US president because he will put his life first, and that's how it works in the US. The security agent will always put their life before the life of the president. That's one of the main criteria to have this work. We saw like when Donald Trump got shot at the ears, the agent being there and they were going in front of him. So in that way, the president kept his life safe, and the agent who is not important for the government in some way will get killed. And we saw that in the movie. The agent is always with the president. Even though he's dying, he said, no, don't leave me there. I need to be with you.
And it represents also the fact that this movie presents the US as, yes, we don't like to talk, we don't like to play nice, but we're still the protector of the free world. And without us, you're powerless. You still need us to protect you. And the agent represent that, and even the president represent that, because she sees workers that have been taken hostage, and she refused to leave them and decided to get hurt even to save them. And it's repaid by the fact that afterwards they helped her better counterattack the terrorists.
Yeah, the president is represent really strong. I don't think like every president in the United States was as strong as her.
Yes, and it really represents in the way that they use their own soft power to illustrate what is happening after that point. Like, they reference to Captain America. They've been taunting her by saying, oh, you're like Captain America. But she's really like Captain America. It's very the image that the US wants to put out in the world, is that they're still Captain America. Regardless of their mistakes, they recognize that they made mistakes, but they're still needed to shield the rest of the world against potential threat, non-state actors, and others maybe. That's what they're suggesting in that movie. And also they mention so many Marvel references. There's Captain America, and then there's Wakanda. Like, you're looking at the scene, you're like, oh, that's like Wakanda. 2 seconds later, it's like Wakanda. They say it, and they try to capitalize on that.
And with that, we will invite you to like this episode.
And subscribe and share this episode. It would be really great. And once again, if you're interested to be a guest in this podcast, we would really like to hear what movie you would like to analyze with us and what is your background specialty.
So don't forget to drop some comment about your thought about this movie. And we will see you in the next episode.
Bye!